Okay, so here you have a video of me driving around on a scooter in Bali, so enjoy this while I'm gonna narrate my experience in Bali. So Bali is probably the most popular island in Indonesia, which has over 18,000 islands. It's also called the Island of Gods due to its spiritual culture, which is mostly Hindu. It's popular because of its nature. There's many waterfalls, jungles, volcanoes, mountains. There's many surfing places. The most popular are Padang and Uluwatu, which host also the World Surfing Championship. The climate is tropical, so there's wet and dry season, and it's relatively cheap compared to the Western world. Due to disrespectful tourists, recently the government has tried to put restrictions, but I don't think it really works. They tried to make international driver's license mandatory for scooter rent, but even I, with my Estonian driver's license, could easily get it. They try to prohibit tourists from going up the mountains, but even that you can do easily. So going there, I had really no expectations for Bali, because initially I was planning to visit just Indonesia and climb some volcanoes, but looking at the map, it really made sense to start from Bali and finish in Jakarta. I heard stories and comments about Bali from several people, which were mostly very positive because it's relatively cheap and relaxed. Arriving, the one thing I noticed was it was relatively clean. There are 30 places, but I was honestly surprised. Every morning you see people sweeping and cleaning the streets, so I guess that does the job. I arrived, got my SIM card for internet, got a scooter and checked into the hostel. First day I visited Uluwatu beach and the temple near Uluwatu. In Uluwatu I saw the same blue ocean that I saw in Australia, but this time it had waves, so I was tempted to surf, but I didn't really do it, so maybe another time. In the temple I was greeted by many monkeys. I was very happy about that because I haven't seen them since India. For pretty much any temple you have to pay a fee and wear a cloth around the waist. That's one thing that the government also made mandatory, and this one's actually working. Like mentioned, Bali is the island of gods, so there are so many temples. Many houses are built as temples. The rituals are kept very much alive, but the temples are very different to South Indian ones where I was. So I visited around 10 temples. Some felt very alive and some were dead as hell. I think some were just open for tourists, but even the buildings were mossy and poorly kept. Unfortunately, from what I've heard, this is the case most everywhere around the world. And going around Bali soon, I realized that the place is filled with tourists. I mean, I think it's good for economy. People are still starting businesses. There are several food places on every single street. They're like home kitchens where the family cooks and you can eat there. It's called a warung. It almost seems like every household has their own business. So going as a tourist, you get approached everywhere and locals try to sell their goods to you. I went around some more, visited some places I had marked on the map, and later in the evening I went back to the backpackers hostel. I had a bunk bed there. So the first night I drank 3 beers, second night 2 beers, third night 1 beer, and then I tapered off completely. Every night there is free dinner and sometimes live music. Also I try to socialize with the other travelers. My problem is that I would love to skip the getting to know each other part and start talking about interesting topics right away, but it doesn't work. The connecting phase of the conversation just bores me. It's the same questions and same conversation all over again every time. Where you're from, where have you been, where next, and so on. So I tried to have those conversations, but to be frank, they bored the living hell out of me. Don't get me wrong, there were some interesting bits, but it's really not for me. So I slept a lot. The next day I rode around on the scooter, visited some temples, waterfalls, and so on. After 3 days of going around as a tourist, I realized this does not work for me. Compared to living in my car in Australia, I was sleeping a lot. I felt drained. I realized I was almost living somebody else's life. Hearing from the stories how people traveled and what they found exciting, but I have zero interest in that. I'm not interested in socializing with other travelers or partying or seeing tourist attractions. I want to do my own thing. Traveling alone, I have the freedom to do whatever comes to mind. Take opportunities, meet the locals, talk bullshit with them and do some random stuff. So with this realization, I felt back on track, revitalized and ready to take on the future challenges. I decided right away that I'm gonna do it my way. The local people in Bali are unbelievably friendly and respectful to the tourists. This really surprised me because I can't imagine them being treated the same way by foreigners. But what I heard before arriving here is true. They do everything possible to make you feel at home and even apologize for things that are not their fault. But the thing is, it always came off as authentic. I have seen people acting nice all around the world, but in Bali it really came off very natural and sweet. The food in Bali is good, but mainly meat and lacking variety in my opinion. I ate mainly rice, egg and vegetables. A good dessert in Bali is banana in dough, deep fried. That's pretty nice. You can get a great meal for under €2 here. Also, one thing you'll see right away, Indonesia is one of the top smoking countries in the world. Locals smoke, tourists smoke, and even the gods seem to smoke. I'm not kidding about that. There's these offering bowls that people make and they put goods in them. They put them in front of the temples and the entrances to houses and everywhere. One thing they put in there is also cigarettes. So even I started smoking a little bit. And how can I reject when even the divine needs to have a cigarette here? You can pretty much picture Bali as a huge chimney. One of the most enjoyable things I did in Bali was riding the scooter. Like in India, it can be shocking at first, but it gets exciting after a while, and then after a while it gets boring again. But you have to be 100% focused to ride in Bali. People pass you with only few centimeters between one another, and it's just a huge chaos. So compared to the West, it's not about rules or regulations, it's more about intuition and feeling. And this is not just about riding your vehicle or the traffic, but many other aspects of life. So I rode up the mountains. It got kind of cold there, which was amazing for a change. The views of the mountains and landscapes were amazing. The roads were never straight, so going up and down the S-shaped mountain roads was very fun for me. The last days I spent in Bali was the way I like to travel and have a cultural experience. I looked around, had some great conversations with the locals, ate some great food, and just had a good time. So, in my experience, it really comes down to what the objective of visiting Bali is. I would imagine it's great for surfing, great for partying, and I'm sure there are places in the nature that are more secluded and private. Unfortunately, I never made it to those places, so don't take this as advice. Would I go back? Probably not. The tourism is too much for me. I like to have a lot of open space around me, and I never found it there. But I will always remember this place for what I learned and the amazing people there.